The cafe was buzzing with its usual morning energy. Steam hissed from the espresso machines, plates clattered, and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. People were chatting quietly, some working on laptops, others waiting for their orders. Among them, a man walked in, sharply dressed, carrying himself with an air of confidence that made him stand out immediately. He scanned the room and chose a table in the far corner, away from the main flow of the cafe. It was the kind of spot that made someone feel private, as if no one could overhear what he said. He didn't order right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and observed the staff moving around. His eyes settled on the waitress, who was juggling orders with practiced ease. She was calm, moving from table to table, taking orders, delivering drinks, and always keeping a polite smile on her face. There was something about the way she worked that caught his attention. He assumed her quiet demeanor meant she was inexperienced, maybe not very educated, maybe easy to dismiss. The man finally waved her over, speaking loudly in Arabic. He wanted to make sure that no one around could understand him, to speak freely without being judged. He started with a basic order, but soon his words took on a sharp tone, aimed to belittle. To make the waitress seem small and unimportant, he laughed quietly to himself, thinking he was clever. No one could understand him after all. The waitress listened carefully, her expression calm, almost neutral. She nodded politely, taking notes of his order without a word. There was a quiet strength in the way she handled the situation. She didn't flinch or show annoyance, even though his tone carried clear disrespect. Most people in the cafe didn't understand what he was saying, so they only saw the man speaking confidently. Not knowing the sharp edge behind his words, he leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other, clearly pleased with himself. His gaze moved around the cafe, checking to see if anyone was reacting. Seeing no visible signs, he chuckled under his breath and continued speaking in Arabic, adding personal remarks that were meant to insult the waitress. Each word he spoke was calculated, intended to reinforce his sense of superiority. He believed he was safe, invisible in his arrogance. Behind the counter, the waitress glanced at the other staff members, who were busy with their tasks. She didn't draw attention to the man, but she was fully aware of what was happening. Her mind raced, thinking of the best way to handle him without causing a scene. She had been in situations before where customers assumed they could talk down to her or anyone else in the cafe. Underestimating her because of her quiet nature, she had learned over time that confidence and poise could say more than words ever could. The man continued, oblivious to the fact that his words were not as hidden as he believed. He smirked, thinking he was clever, feeling the rush of superiority. He was enjoying the moment, completely unaware of how close he was to embarrassment. Other customers noticed a subtle tension but didn't intervene, unsure of what was happening. The atmosphere carried a strange mix of normal cafe chatter and an unspoken drama. Unfolding quietly in the corner, the waitress approached his table with his order. Placing the cup and plate carefully in front of him, she spoke politely, her voice calm and professional. She answered a question he asked in Arabic, perfectly fluent and with a tone that was polite but confident. The man's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his armor of arrogance. He hadn't expected her to understand him. He tried to hide his surprise, but it was visible. He shifted in his chair, momentarily lost for words. Feeling the first stirrings of discomfort, the waitress smiled slightly, still professional, still polite. She had noticed his attempt to assert dominance, and she had chosen her moment carefully. Her response was not meant to shame him publicly, but to make him aware that his words had not gone unnoticed. She maintained her composure, giving no hint of anger or resentment, only calm, quiet confidence. The man's smirk faltered, placed by a mix of confusion and realization. As he sipped his coffee, he tried to continue his conversation in Arabic, testing if she understood everything he said. The waitress responded as needed, her answers precise, showing that she was fully aware of what he had said. The man's discomfort grew. He realized that his assumption of safety, his belief that he could speak freely without consequence, had been wrong. Every word he had spoken, every insult, had been heard and understood. The cafe continued around them. The other patrons absorbed in their own worlds, unaware of the silent confrontation taking place. The man fidgeted in his chair, suddenly very conscious of how he might appear to the staff and other customers. His confidence, which had filled the room when he first arrived, was now waning. He glanced around, noticing for the first time the subtle looks of respect and admiration toward the waitress from other staff members. They recognized her skill, her calm authority, even in the face of disrespect. He tried to regain composure, attempting to speak in a lighter tone, but the shift in his demeanor was clear. The waitress remained composed, not giving him an easy way to dominate the situation. She continued her work with calm efficiency, handling other customers, taking orders, and managing drinks with the same ease she had when he first arrived. Her confidence was quiet but powerful, and it became increasingly clear to him that his behavior had been misplaced at one point. He leaned forward, attempting a joke in Arabic, hoping to mask the embarrassment he felt creeping in. The waitress responded with a polite, friendly comment, fully understanding the joke, but without encouraging any further attempts at mockery. The man realized he had underestimated her, that his arrogance had blinded him. For the first time that morning, he felt a twinge of humility. The tension between them was subtle but unmistakable. The man's previous air of superiority had shifted, replaced with a sense of self-awareness. He had thought he was safe speaking Arabic, thought no one could see through his words, and yet here was the waitress, calm and professional, fully aware and unshaken. She had proven, without raising her voice or making a scene, that his assumptions were wrong. As the morning moved on, the man finished his coffee quietly, no longer speaking loudly or attempting to assert dominance. He observed the waitress more carefully now, noting her skill and composure. He felt a mixture of respect and unease, realizing that the way he had treated others based on assumptions of ignorance was flawed. She had handled the situation with grace, teaching a lesson he hadn't expected in the middle of a busy cafe when he finally left. He did so with a subtle nod, a small acknowledgement of the mistake he had made. The waitress watched him go, returning to her work without fanfare, but with a quiet satisfaction. She knew the encounter had left an impression, not just on the man, but on herself as well. It was another reminder that calm confidence, skill, poise often speak louder than arrogance, and that underestimating someone is always a mistake. The cafe carried on, the morning rush continuing as usual. The waitress moved between tables, taking orders and delivering drinks, each interaction handled with the same professionalism. The man's brief but impactful presence had added a layer of quiet tension, a reminder that respect and understanding are earned, not assumed. And though the incident had ended, the lesson lingered, unseen by most, quietly shaping how those involved would see each other and themselves in the days to come. The cafe continued to hum with activity as the morning moved forward. The soft murmur of conversations, the clinking of cups and spoons, and the hiss of the espresso machine created a rhythm that everyone seemed to settle into. The waitress moved gracefully among the tables, attending to each customer with a mix of efficiency and warmth. Her presence was calming, like a quiet anchor in the bustling environment. After the man had left, she paused briefly to take a deep breath, thinking about the encounter. It had been unusual, certainly, but it was not the first time someone had underestimated her. She had learned over the years that appearances often misled people. Just because someone spoke with confidence, dressed sharply, or tried to assert dominance did not mean they knew everything, or could intimidate her. The lesson she had taught, man without saying much had reminded her of that. The other staff members noticed her. Brief pause and offered quiet smiles. They respected her, not just for her skill at work, but for the quiet authority she carried. Customers may see a simple waitress going about her tasks, but the staff knew the depth of her understanding, the calm intelligence that guided her decisions. She returned their smiles, acknowledging them, and moved on to the next order. A new customer arrived. A young woman with a tired look on her face, carrying a stack of papers and a laptop. She seemed to be preparing for a long morning of work at the cafe. The waitress greeted her warmly, helping her find a comfortable seat and offering suggestions from the menu. She knew that small gestures, like remembering a customer's favorite drink or noticing when someone seemed tired, could make a big difference. It wasn't just about serving coffee. It was about making people feel seen and valued. As she worked, the waitress reflected on the subtle power dynamics in the cafe. Some customers arrived confident and polite, while others attempted to assert dominance or belittle the staff. She had learned that the key was not to react with anger or resentment, but to maintain composure and respond thoughtfully. People often revealed their true character when they thought no one was watching or listening. And she had learned to listen carefully and respond wisely. She remembered her early days working in cafes, when she had been new, unsure, and sometimes intimidated by demanding customers. Over time, she had developed a sense of quiet strength, learning how to manage difficult interactions without losing her calm. It was a skill that required patience, observation, and a deep understanding of human behavior. Today's encounter had reminded her of that skill and reinforced her confidence. Meanwhile, the man from earlier seemed to linger in her thoughts more than she had expected. She wondered what he would take away from the encounter, whether he would reflect on his behavior or dismiss it entirely. She knew that real change in people often came slowly, through moments that challenged their assumptions and forced them to see things differently. She hoped quietly that he had learned something from the experience. The cafe was a microcosm of human interactions, a place where personalities, emotions, and intentions intersected constantly. The waitress observed each customer carefully, noticing patterns, gestures, and the small clues that revealed more than words alone. She had become skilled at understanding people, not by reading their minds, but by paying attention to the subtle signs they gave off. It was a form of intelligence that went beyond what could be measured on paper. Throughout the morning, she interacted with a variety of customers, some cheerful, some distracted, some frustrated. Each encounter was unique, requiring a slightly different approach. Her ability to adapt and respond appropriately made her work not just a job, but a form of art. She moved through the cafe with a rhythm that balanced efficiency and empathy, ensuring that each customer felt attended to, even in a busy environment. At one point, a group of young men arrived, loud and energetic, clearly used to being in control wherever they went. They placed their order with a mix of casual commands and jokes, some of which bordered on disrespectful. The waitress handled them, as she always did, maintaining her calm demeanor while ensuring their order was accurate and delivered promptly. She did not allow their energy to unsettle her. Instead, treating them with the same professionalism she offered to every customer. One of the men attempted to speak in a language he assumed the waitress would not understand, hoping to make a joke at her expense. She paused briefly, responding in the same language effortlessly, correcting a small detail in their order with a friendly smile. The group froze for a moment, surprised by her understanding. She didn't make them feel embarrassed, but her response subtly reminded them that underestimating her was a mistake. They laughed awkwardly, realizing they had misjudged her, and from that moment, their tone shifted to one of respect. Watching all this, a few regular customers exchanged glances, impressed by the way the waitress managed the situation. It was not just her skill at serving food or drinks, but her ability to navigate social dynamics gracefully. She had an instinct for human behavior, recognizing the right moment to assert authority and the right moment to remain silent. This balance made her presence in the cafe both respected and admired. Between the rush of customers, she took moments to organize orders, clean tables, and ensure that the cafe ran smoothly. Each small task was handled with care, contributing to an overall atmosphere of professionalism and warmth. She knew that people noticed these details, even if they didn't comment on them. The subtle impression of competence and grace often lingered longer than words. The morning continued with its steady rhythm, each interaction adding layers to the day's story. The waitress remained focused, attentive, and calm, demonstrating that strength was not always loud or aggressive. It was quiet, measured, and confident, capable of influencing others without the need for overt confrontation. She carried herself with a sense of purpose, aware of the lessons life continued to teach her through everyday encounters. As she prepared a fresh pot of coffee, she thought again about the man from earlier. She knew that humility often came from moments like the one they had shared, moments that challenged assumptions and forced reflection. She hoped he would remember the experience, not just as a minor embarrassment, but as a reminder that respect and understanding were earned, not assumed. By the time the cafe reached its late morning lull, the waitress had completed countless interactions, each one handled with skill and grace. She had managed difficult customers, attended to regulars, and ensured that the day moved forward smoothly. Her focus was unwavering, her energy steady, and her presence quietly commanding as she wiped down the counter and organized cups for the next wave of customers. She felt a sense of satisfaction. The morning had been challenging, but she had handled it with poise. She knew that her work was about more than serving coffee. It was about connecting with people, understanding them, and, when necessary, teaching subtle lessons in humility and respect. The encounter with the man who thought he was safe, speaking Arabic, lingered in her mind, a reminder of the power of observation, patience, and quiet intelligence. She had proven, without raising her voice or creating a scene, that assumptions could be wrong and that respect could not be taken for granted. It was a lesson she carried with her every day, and one she knew would continue to shape her interactions with others in the cafe and beyond. The cafe began to fill again with new customers, and the waitress moved among them, her energy steady and her focus sharp. Each smile she offered, each polite word, and each efficient movement reinforced the quiet authority she carried. She understood that real strength often came not from loud words or visible power, but from the confidence and calmness that allowed her to handle any situation with grace. And so, the day continued, the cafe alive with the stories and interactions of countless people. The waitress remained at the center of it all, a steady presence, quietly shaping the atmosphere through her actions and her choices. Her mind continued to reflect on the subtle dynamics of human behavior, aware that every interaction was an opportunity to learn, to teach, and to influence in ways that were often invisible but deeply felt. The cafe had settled into its midday rhythm, a gentle hum of conversation, soft clinking of cups, and the occasional hiss of the coffee machine. The morning rush had passed, but the flow of customers remained steady. The waitress moved through the tables with ease, her movements precise but unhurried. She had become the quiet center of the cafe, the person who ensured everything ran smoothly without drawing attention to herself. Unnecessarily, the man from earlier had returned. He walked in with a hesitant air, clearly aware that he had left a small crack in his confidence during his last visit. He scanned the room, spotting the waitress immediately. She noticed him too, her expression calm and neutral. She didn't rush to acknowledge him, but she also didn't ignore his presence. She continued serving other customers, moving with her usual composed energy. Letting him feel the shift in the atmosphere without a word, he approached the counter, asking for a drink in Arabic. But this time his voice was softer, less certain. He had learned that the cafe was not just a place to sit quietly, enjoy a cup of coffee. It was a space where his behavior had consequences. The waitress came over to take his order, smiling politely, her tone friendly but measured. She responded in Arabic flawlessly, making subtle corrections and suggestions that he had not expected. Her response carried no malice, only competence and calm, and it unsettled him in a way that forced him to pay attention as she handed him his drink. He tried to make small talk, testing whether she would engage. The waitress responded naturally, not offering any judgment, but maintaining the polite and confident tone that had marked her from the start. He realized that he was no longer in control of the interaction, that his previous arrogance had been misplaced. The quiet confidence of the waitress reminded him that respect was not automatic. It was earned and maintained through conduct and awareness. He took a seat at his usual corner table, sipping his drink slowly, observing her as she moved about the cafe. The waitress continued her work, taking orders, clearing tables, and making small talk with other customers. She was patient, attentive, and fully aware of the man's presence. Her awareness did not intrude upon her work, but it created a subtle tension in the air, one that the man could not ignore. He felt the quiet weight of her observation, and it made him reconsider his earlier assumptions about people and authority. Nearby, a couple of regular customers were chatting softly, unaware of the subtle exchange taking place. They noticed, however, the way the waitress carried herself, calm yet fully in control, and admired her professionalism. It was not the loud or dramatic actions that impressed them, but the quiet strength and intelligence that she displayed consistently. Every small gesture, the careful way she poured coffee, the way she remembered orders, the polite yet firm responses built a picture of someone who was competent, confident, and unshakable. The man tried again to speak in Arabic, attempting a joke that he assumed would go unnoticed or misunderstood. The waitress responded effortlessly, correcting the small error in his phrasing with a polite smile. He froze for a moment, realizing that he had underestimated her understanding and composure. The subtle correction was enough to shake his confidence further, but it was delivered in such a gentle way that it did not feel confrontational. Instead, it prompted self-reflection, quiet awareness that he had made an error in judgment. As the cafe continued its steady rhythm, other customers observed the dynamic between the man and the waitress without fully understanding it. The man's initial arrogance had faded, replaced by a growing respect and cautious awareness. He began to realize that the cafe was not just a place to assert his sense of superiority, but a place where his behavior had real consequences. The waitress had demonstrated, without raising her voice or making a scene, that assumptions and arrogance could be gently but firmly corrected. Throughout the afternoon, the waitress continued to handle every interaction with grace. She moved seamlessly between tables, attending to each customer with care, while maintaining a subtle awareness of the man. He tried to engage her in conversation sporadically, but each attempt reminded him of her intelligence and patience. He found himself thinking before speaking, measuring his words, and becoming more conscious of how he presented himself. The cafe had become a space of subtle lessons, each moment reinforcing the idea that behavior and respect were intertwined. At one point, the man dropped his pen while writing on a small notebook. The waitress noticed immediately and bent down to pick it up, handing it to him with a polite smile. Her gesture was simple, yet it carried an unspoken message. Kindness and professionalism were not signs of weakness, but strength. The man accepted the pen quietly, feeling a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. He realized that he had been harsh and dismissive before, and that the waitress's quiet authority had challenged him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The cafe's atmosphere remained lively, yet a subtle layer of awareness had settled over it. Other staff members continued their work, but it was clear that the waitress had an unspoken influence on the space. Her calm demeanor and confident handling of every situation created an environment where customers were treated fairly, efficiently, and respectfully. Even those who initially tried to assert dominance or belittle her found themselves adjusting their behavior, consciously or unconsciously. In response to her quiet strength, the man began to observe her more closely. Noticing the small details, the way she remembered names and orders, the way she anticipated needs before they were voiced, the natural ease with which she handled every situation. He felt a growing sense of humility, recognizing that true competence often went unnoticed by those too eager to assert superiority. The waitress's presence was a constant reminder that assumptions could be misleading, and that respect was earned through awareness, patience, and intelligence. As the afternoon wore on, the man started to engage in genuine conversation with her, not to test her understanding or challenge her, but to learn from the interaction. The waitress responded naturally, offering polite and thoughtful answers, without condescension or judgment. Their conversation remained brief, yet it carried a depth that the man had not anticipated. He realized that he had been wrong in thinking he could speak freely without consequence, and that the waitress had handled the entire situation with quiet dignity and skill. The cafe continued to bustle around them, but the dynamic between the man and the waitress had shifted. He was no longer the one trying to assert control. Instead, he was observing, learning, and adjusting his behavior in response to her subtle guidance. He understood, finally, that respect and humility were not weaknesses, but essential components of human interaction. The waitress had demonstrated this effortlessly, teaching a lesson without overt confrontation or drama, in the quiet moments between serving other customers. The waitress reflected on the interactions of the day. She understood that human behavior was complex and often unpredictable. but that careful observation, patience, and a calm presence could influence outcomes in meaningful ways. She had managed the man's arrogance, guided him toward awareness, and maintained her professionalism, all without disrupting the cafe's flow. It was a testament to the strength that comes from quiet intelligence and empathy. By late afternoon, the man had finished his drink and was preparing to leave. He stood quietly, waiting for an appropriate moment to thank the waitress. When he finally spoke, his voice was sincere, expressing appreciation not just for the drink, but for the subtle lessons she had imparted. She responded with her usual polite smile, acknowledging him without making the interaction dramatic. He left the cafe with a sense of reflection and humility, aware that the experience had changed his perspective in ways he would not forget. The waitress watched him go, returning to her work seamlessly. The cafe's rhythm continued, and she moved among the tables with her usual balance of efficiency, warmth, and quiet authority. Each interaction was handled with care, each customer treated with respect, and each challenge met with patience. The day had been full of subtle lessons and human insights, reinforcing the understanding that quiet strength often speaks louder than words. As she prepared for the evening rush, she considered the ongoing flow of customers, each with their own stories, personalities, and challenges. She knew that her role in the cafe was not just to serve coffee, but to navigate human behavior thoughtfully, to provide a space where respect and understanding were present, and to demonstrate that composure and intelligence could guide even the most difficult interactions. The afternoon had reinforced this truth, and she carried it with her as the cafe continued its daily rhythm. Quietly shaping the experiences of all who entered, the cafe had begun to transition from the steady flow of midday customers to the early evening crowd. The soft golden light from outside filtered through the windows, casting warm patterns on the tables. The atmosphere shifted slightly, becoming a mixture of relaxation and anticipation. As people settled in after work or came in for a quiet moment before continuing their day, the waitress moved through the space with a quiet confidence. Her presence familiar and reassuring to those around her, the man from earlier returned once more. This time, there was a noticeable difference in his demeanor. He walked in with less confidence, more cautious in his movements. It was clear that the previous encounters had left an impression on him. He found a table near the back and sat down, observing the cafe and its staff. But he seemed more aware of the way he presented himself. The waitress noticed him immediately, her expression calm and neutral. She acknowledged him with a polite nod, but continued with her work, serving other customers efficiently. As she approached his table to take his order, he spoke in Arabic, but his tone was softer and more respectful than before. The waitress listened carefully, understanding every word, and responded in kind. She suggested small adjustments to his order politely, showing that she had noticed the details he might not have paid attention to. The man's eyes widened slightly in surprise, realizing that she had remembered his preferences from his previous visits. He had underestimated not only her understanding, but also her attention to detail and memory. While preparing his order, she noticed how he tried to engage her in conversation. Seemingly attempting to recover from the embarrassment of his earlier behavior, she responded naturally, her words polite and thoughtful, without any hint of judgment. He realized slowly that his previous attempts to assert dominance were unnecessary, and that his behavior had been observed and gently corrected. The subtle shift in their dynamic was palpable, though unspoken. He felt a growing sense of humility, an acknowledgement that he had been wrong in assuming he could speak freely without consequence. Around the cafe, other customers were observing, though not fully aware of the details. They noticed the quiet exchange, the subtle tension, and the way the waitress carried herself. Her composure and skill had become part of the cafe's atmosphere, influencing the space without overt display. The staff respected her, seeing her calm authority in action, and customers felt the difference, even if they could not articulate it. The man, meanwhile, was slowly learning that her strength was not loud or aggressive, but quiet, steady, and deeply perceptive. As she handed him his drink, she offered a gentle smile, encouraging him without condescension. The man took a sip and paused, reflecting on the interactions of the day. He felt a mix of admiration and embarrassment, realizing how wrong he had been in his earlier assumptions. The waitress had managed every encounter with care and intelligence, turning his attempts at superiority into lessons in humility. He had come seeking a simple coffee, but he was leaving with something far more significant: growing awareness of respect, patience, and human dignity. The cafe continued its steady rhythm, with the clatter of dishes and murmur of conversations filling the space. The waitress moved between tables, attending to orders and clearing tables with seamless efficiency. She interacted with customers of all kinds, some cheerful, some tired, some frustrated. Each interaction required a slightly different approach, and she handled them all with the same calm professionalism. Her presence became a subtle guide for the man, who watched her carefully, learning without being directly taught at one point. He attempted to make a light-hearted comment in Arabic, hoping to see if she would understand it as he had intended. The waitress responded without hesitation, understanding perfectly, and replied in a way that maintained politeness while subtly correcting the nuance of his statement. He was again caught off guard, realizing that his words had not gone unnoticed or misunderstood. The subtle guidance was effective, teaching him the importance of careful speech and thoughtfulness, all without creating embarrassment or conflict. The man found himself reflecting on the lessons he had unconsciously absorbed throughout his visits. He had assumed that speaking in a language he thought was private would give him a sense of control and safety. But he had been mistaken. The waitress's quiet intelligence and awareness had revealed the flaw in his assumptions. He felt a growing sense of respect for her, realizing that true authority was not about intimidation or arrogance, but about presence, observation, and composure. As the cafe's early evening crowd grew, the waitress continued her work seamlessly. She managed multiple orders at once, attended 2 special requests, and handled minor issues with skill and calm. The man observed, noticing how she anticipated needs before they were expressed, how she maintained control of the space without drawing attention to herself, and how her subtle gestures communicated competence and understanding. He began to understand that the lessons she offered were not just about language or behavior, but about the broader ways in which people interact, respect each other, and navigate social spaces. He tried another conversation, this time more carefully asking about a menu item and its preparation. The waitress responded with patience, explaining the details and offering suggestions based on his preferences. Her tone was neutral but kind, providing information without judgment, and he found himself appreciating the way she engaged. He realized that he had been so focused on asserting dominance that he had missed the value of genuine conversation and understanding. The cafe staff continued their work, but it was evident that the waitress had a quiet authority over the space. She guided the flow of service, subtly managing interactions and ensuring that each customer felt attended to. Her presence created an environment where respect and professionalism were expected, not demanded, and where human behavior could be observed and influenced with grace. The man began to see this, understanding that her influence was not about control, but about competence and awareness. As the afternoon shifted into evening, the man's demeanor had changed significantly. He no longer spoke with arrogance, no longer attempted to test or belittle. Instead, he observed, reflected, and interacted with more humility. The lessons he had absorbed, though subtle, were powerful. The waitress had demonstrated the value of calm intelligence, the strength of composure, and the importance of respect, all through her actions and careful words. At one point, he spilled a small amount of coffee accidentally. The waitress noticed immediately, approaching him with a gentle smile and a clean napkin. She helped him manage the spill discreetly, ensuring that he did not feel embarrassed. Her response was simple but effective, reinforcing the idea that kindness, awareness, and patience could teach as much as words or overt actions. The man accepted her assistance quietly, feeling the depth of her understanding and composure. Throughout the cafe, other customers continued their routines, unaware of the full significance of the interactions taking place. They noticed the waitress's efficiency and calm presence, appreciating the seamless service without realizing the depth of skill required. The man, however, was fully aware, and his reflections deepened with each passing moment. He realized that humility and respect were not just abstract concepts, but practical ways to navigate life and relationships. As the evening approached, the cafe space slowed slightly. But the waitress remained focused, attending to each detail with care. She had handled difficult interactions, guided the man's understanding, and maintained the smooth operation of the cafe. Her actions were quiet but powerful, teaching lessons without drama or confrontation. The man recognized the significance of what he had learned, understanding that the experience would stay with him long after he left the cafe, when it was finally time for him to leave. He stood quietly, gathering his belongings. He approached the counter and offered a sincere thank you. Not just for the service, but for the subtle guidance and lessons he had absorbed. The waitress responded with her usual calm smile, acknowledging him without fanfare. He left the cafe with a sense of reflection, aware that the encounters had changed his perspective, behavior in meaningful ways. The waitress returned to her duties seamlessly. Her focus on the cafe and the customers around her. She understood that each day brought new interactions, new challenges, and new opportunities to guide and teach through quiet strength. The lessons of the day, particularly the subtle exchanges with the man who had underestimated her, reinforced her belief in the power of composure, awareness, and kindness. She moved among the tables, serving drinks, clearing plates, and engaging with customers, embodying a calm authority that was both respected and admired. As the evening light faded and the cafe prepared for its closing routine, the waitress reflected on the flow of the day. She had managed interactions that tested patience and skill, guided individuals toward humility and respect, and maintained a professional and welcoming environment. The experience with the man had been a reminder of the impact of quiet, intelligence, and the subtle ways in which influence could be exerted. She carried that understanding with her, ready to continue shaping her environment with care, awareness, and poise. Confident that her lessons would resonate far beyond the walls of the cafe was quiet now. The late evening crowd having thinned, leaving only a few scattered customers enjoying their drinks and conversations. The soft glow of the overhead lights reflected on the polished tables, casting a warm ambience throughout the space. The waitress moved between tables with her usual calm, checking orders, clearing cups, and ensuring that everything was in place for the closing hours. There was a quiet satisfaction in the rhythm of her work, a sense of completion after the day's steady pace. The man from previous visits entered once more. This time his steps were careful, almost tentative. He seemed to carry the lessons of the day with him, a quiet awareness replacing the arrogance he had shown earlier. He scanned the cafe and found a table, choosing a spot that allowed him to observe without drawing attention to himself. The waitress noticed his presence immediately, but continued her duties without any change in her professional composure. She had learned that her role was not to confront or challenge overtly, but to guide subtly through presence and action. When she approached his table to take his order, he spoke in Arabic again, but this time his tone was polite and respectful. He asked questions about the menu, showing curiosity and a willingness to learn rather than to assert dominance. The waitress responded naturally, giving detailed explanations, and offered suggestions that suited his taste. There was no condescension in her voice, only clarity and friendliness. He listened carefully, impressed by her knowledge and attention to detail, recognizing that she had managed to teach him patience, respect, and humility without ever making him feel foolish. As he sipped his coffee, he reflected on his previous visits. The earlier arrogance and the casual insults he had directed in Arabic were replaced with self-awareness. He realized how easily people could be misjudged, how assumptions about knowledge, ability, or character could be completely wrong. The waitress had not only noticed his words and intentions, but had also guided him to a deeper understanding of respect through her calm demeanor and quiet intelligence. He felt a sense of gratitude he hadn't expected. Recognizing the subtle but powerful lessons she had imparted, the cafe continued to hum with its usual evening energy. Conversations were quieter now, the atmosphere more relaxed, but still vibrant with human interaction. The waitress moved seamlessly between tables, attending to regulars, new customers, and occasional late arrivals. Each interaction was handled with care and awareness, her patience and professionalism shaping the experience of the space. The man watched, learning, absorbing the unspoken lessons that came from observing her composure, empathy, and skill. At one point, a small incident occurred at a nearby table. A child accidentally knocked over a cup, spilling its contents onto the table. The waitress responded immediately, approaching with a gentle smile, helping clean the mess without drawing attention or creating embarrassment. Her actions were calm, efficient, and kind. The man noticed how naturally she handled unexpected situations, how her presence brought reassurance and stability. He understood that her strength was not loud or assertive, but quietly transformative, shaping behavior and expectations without confrontation. Throughout the evening, he engaged in small talk with her, asking about recommendations, menu items, and even her day. She responded warmly, answering his questions without judgment. Maintaining a balance of professionalism and friendliness, he found himself learning more than just menu details. He was observing the way she navigated human interactions, how she guided behavior subtly, and how she maintained authority through composure rather than aggression. Each small exchange added to his growing respect and understanding as he reflected on his actions from earlier in the day. He realized that the cafe had become more than a place to sit and drink coffee. It had become a space for observation, learning, and reflection. The waitress had turned what could have been an embarrassing or confrontational situation into an opportunity for growth. Her calm intelligence had shown him that respect was earned. Humility was valuable, and patience was a powerful tool in human interaction. He began to see the importance of considering others, listening carefully, and understanding before acting or speaking. The evening continued with a steady flow of customers, each one bringing new interactions, small challenges, and opportunities for guidance. The waitress managed everything effortlessly, her calm and confident presence a stabilizing force in the cafe. The man observed quietly, increasingly aware of how much could be learned from her example. He understood that her influence did not come from authority or dominance, but from skill, awareness, and empathy. At one point, he accidentally dropped a small item from his bag. The waitress noticed immediately, picking it up and returning it with a smile. Her gesture was simple, yet it conveyed attentiveness, kindness, and a quiet sense of care. He felt a surge of appreciation, recognizing that she had consistently demonstrated attentiveness and respect without expecting anything in return. Her actions reinforced the lessons he had absorbed throughout the day, leaving a lasting impression on him. As the cafe approached closing time, the staff began their final routines, cleaning tables, organizing supplies, and preparing for the next day. The waitress continued to move among the remaining customers, tending to their needs with the same calm efficiency that had marked her throughout the day. The man finished his drink, reflecting on the journey from arrogance to humility, from assumption to understanding. He felt that his time in the cafe had been transformative, largely because of the subtle but powerful guidance of the waitress. Before leaving, he approached the counter and offered a sincere thank you. His voice carried genuine respect and acknowledgement of the lessons he had learned, not just about manners or conversation, but about patience, empathy, and the importance of understanding others. The waitress responded with her usual gentle smile, accepting his gratitude without fanfare, knowing that the lesson had been internalized. He left the cafe with a sense of growth, aware that his experiences there had changed his perspective on behavior, respect, and human interaction. The cafe returned to a quiet state. The final customers leaving, the tables cleared, and the machines powered down for the night. The waitress took a moment to reflect on the day, considering the interactions, challenges, and lessons. She knew that each day brought new opportunities to guide and influence subtly, to demonstrate patience, composure, and empathy. Her calm presence had not only shaped the cafe's environment, but it also left a meaningful impact on individuals who entered her space. The man's journey from arrogance to understanding remained in her thoughts, a reminder of the subtle power of quiet intelligence and composure. She knew that influence did not always need to be visible or dramatic. Often, it was the small gestures, attentive observation, and calm guidance that had the most lasting effect. Her actions throughout the day had demonstrated this truth repeatedly, leaving a mark on those who observed or interacted with her as she finished her final tasks. Turning off lights and securing the cafe for the night, she felt a sense of satisfaction. The day had been full of lessons, both given and received, moments of reflection, and opportunities to guide through presence and action. She understood that true strength came not from loud words or visible dominance, but from the quiet authority of composure, empathy, and awareness. The lessons she had shared and the example she had set would linger in the minds of those who had observed, influencing behavior and understanding far beyond the walls of the cafe. With the cafe now empty, she gathered her belongings and prepared to leave. Carrying with her the calm, confidence, and quiet knowledge that had defined her day, she knew that tomorrow would bring new customers, new challenges, and new opportunities to guide, teach, and influence subtly. The experiences of the day, particularly the man who had underestimated her, remained a testament to the power of patience, intelligence, and human understanding, proving that respect and humility were lessons best learned through quiet example and careful observation. Her presence, her actions, her composure had changed not only the space, but the people within it, leaving an enduring impression that would be remembered long after the cafe lights dimmed for the night.